All right. Again, thank you for joining today's session. I'm here with Troy Murphy. We're going to talk about how Yes Communities modernize their planning and analytics workflows and technology data foundation. I'm Mike Nader with Incorta. We'll do introductions here in just a moment, but just logistically for today's session, we will be taking questions if time allows at the end of the session. Our administrator is monitoring the chat for us. So if you do have questions as we go along, please take a look at the chat. There's a message in there right now that it just essentially says the same thing, that please put any questions here and we'll get to those as we move on. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let our main presenter today introduce himself, and then I'll jump back in. Troy?
Hey everyone, good morning. My name's Troy Murphy. I'm the director of FP&A at Yes. So I'm responsible for everything from budgeting, forecast, reporting and analytics, and investor requests and support. So I manage a team on the BI side and also FP&A.
Right. Thank you so much, Troy. And everybody, my name is Mike Nader. I head up business analytics solutions here at Incorta. We're a team of folks focused on taking and implementing and really helping design implementations around our technology that support various business use cases. And the world of FP&A is near and dear to my heart. I've been working in that space for quite some time. So really excited to talk through what the team at Yes Communities did and how we're continuing to move forward. Troy, you want to tell us a little bit about Yes? And then I've got a few questions for you as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for context, we were founded in 2008. We actually just celebrated our 18th anniversary. We are a privately held REIT, and we're one of the largest owners and operators of manufactured housing communities in the US. So we have roughly about 300 communities, 83,000 home sites across 23 states. We also have about 1,300 employees who pretty diverse roles, anything from maintenance teams at properties to our C-suite. And really, our mission is to provide innovative, affordable manufactured housing communities and really support our residents across the US.
All right. So just one more logistical point, a really scheduled point agenda for today's session. We're going to just talk about how the team at Yes and let Troy really describe their legacy approach and what they were doing prior to that. We'll talk a little about the catalyst for change. And frankly, this one for me is the most interesting. There's always reasons why we undertake these technology conversions or modernizations. And I want to dig into some detail around why specifically Yes Communities did so, and then really what were the broader challenges that they faced in doing that modernization. I mean, so Troy, as we get in, I mean, from the old way perspective, I guess what was the most critical piece that you started with? What prompted the initial journey? I'd love to understand.
Yeah, before we moved over to Incorta and Adaptive, we were using an Excel plugin. We had been on there for a couple of years. Prior to that, we were also on some different versions of reporting. And we continued to grow as a business and really needed to drive the business forward. So there's really a few main points that kind of brought us to this. First being, it was just we had a lot of users that were getting very frustrated. It was very slow getting them the data and even planning that we needed to do. It also, the slow loads, it would take 2 to 3 minutes to load a report. We also had some pretty heavy refresh efforts. It would run about 8 hours of data every morning, as we have millions of rows of data that's getting put in every day. Second, there really wasn't a trusted source of truth. We had a lot of offline reports. The plugin, if anyone uses the plugin, can create issues, either if it didn't load correctly or isn't saving correctly, something's going on their computer. But it did kind of disrupt our source of truth and kind of create these inconsistent answers. And like I mentioned, it really just wasn't becoming scalable as we continue to grow as a company. Clearly, there's more users, we have more data across everything. and just more requests to get everyone the reporting they need to run day to day. And then
Yeah,
lastly, really
please.
just some shallow visibility into transaction level details. We were pre-aggregating a lot of things in our database, but we couldn't really see, end users couldn't see that level of detail. And they also had to do it from their computer, which we have a lot of people in the field just trying to even just walk the property. They weren't able to access anything from their phone.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more on the scalability side. I mean, I think that especially for folks if you're not in the REIT space and it's not a specialty of mine, I learned a whole lot from your team, and thank you for all the partnership during the deployment. Um, Tell me about some of the complexity in the acquisitions, and because I think it would be good for everybody to understand why you have more requests coming in. And can you give me some examples of where having more depth of visibility potentially adds that business value, the nature of those kind of questions?
Yeah, so we tend to buy more portfolios that have a lot of properties in one group. It comes with more employees, more data clearly for each property. It just really wasn't becoming scalable as we looked at everything. And it kind of led us to reevaluate what we needed to do. So we kind of narrowed down our scope to basically 6 points that really kind of led the entire discovery phase and still today is really important to us. So first, just being the speed. Like I mentioned, we were waiting several minutes for reports before, and so for any planning, we have individual property budgets. So imagine 300 properties for each, 300 properties, and there's a budget for each one. It just caused a lot of lead times, and it was very frustrating for end users. On the mobile access, like I mentioned, kind of just the overall user experience. We really want some system that we're able to access from our phone, and that's trusted by everyone in the field. And we're also seeing the same data points. Third is kind of having dynamic forecasting and versioning. Before when we were using Excel, if we needed to update assumptions or push actuals forward, it was very difficult. Basically became an entire new budget process. So we really needed to move towards being able to update those different versions as we go along. Fourth is just having a single source of truth. Again, just want to have trusted, accurate data across the company that really is a single source of truth. And then scalability, like we talked about, we just really didn't want to have any practical limitations. During the move, we want to make sure that if we do acquire additional properties and users, as we continue to grow our reporting, we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to run immediately into scalability problems. And then lastly, just having granularity so that everyone can see the underlying data that's making up our metrics and they can dive into the details as they need to, not just having those aggregated summaries.
When you and I were first having conversations about your goals in this project, you brought speed up, and it's first on your slide here. And often I think that people underestimate the impact of that slowness more culturally in an organization. I mean, yes, we can probably wait 30 seconds to get a report, but it's not the 30 seconds that matters. It's sort of the behavior it induces. Can you talk a little about that and what you all were seeing?
Yeah, basically just freezing up computers. You had to physically be in your office, one, and then it would take up to several minutes sometimes to load reports or even just their budget to review and do any inputs they needed to do. But it would literally freeze their computer while it was loading. So if you can imagine, while they're waiting, they're getting frustrated. It caused some disruption, not just immediately for those 30 seconds to a few minutes, but kind of in between that too, because they never knew how long they have to wait for everything. It just caused a lot of frustration and efficiency, especially for our field users.
Yeah, what I've seen over a number of deployments in my career is, coming into those environments, that's where you get a lot of those shadow IT or secondary systems that get built out. So your planning system becomes sort of a repository as opposed to an active tool or an interactive tool. Of these, so you've got six listed out here. I mean, these challenges I don't think are uncommon more broadly. Which one or a few were really the main catalyst for you? What was the driver, or there's something else that said, finally, we need to start this modernization approach?
Yeah, I think honestly, all of them are pretty important. But if I was going to pick two of them, I definitely would say speed, just like we just talked about, and also just single source of truth. I think a lot of companies experience this where you have one department that's starting to put together metrics and other ones that aren't. You get different results and causes a lot of problems. It's very important to us that every end user has a good and accurate view into has accurate data and can trust that data regardless of who you are.
So your team, the other thing that we talked about, I remember that when we kicked the project off, I mean, your CFO was engaged with us in that project day one, and you had a cross-functional team, and I love the fact you called it the expedition team. That was sort of, I think it's a phenomenal message as to how we were approaching the project and the goals of it. How did you come about deciding that this was the right way to do it? Why each component of this team?
Yeah, absolutely. I there's really kind of think of this as like a collaboration. I would say these three groups really still drive a lot of our innovation and just day-to-day requests. And we've still kind of continued this framework. But really, I think of it in kind of three sections. So one for FP&A, clearly we had our sets of requirements that we knew impacted there too, but were important that we met those requirements and also just our planning needs. Two, I would say our C-suite and field leadership was really important for the buy-in and making sure that we're aligned on goals across the company, and it also aligned with the longer term goals that they have in mind for the company. And then third, just having the end users really who are using this day to day for getting into the nitty gritty for home office and both our field teams. And we really wanted that single source of truth and making sure that everything was efficient. And so the three of them really play together. I think different needs, but um, at the end of the day, we're just trying to drive the business forward and we have a mutual goal.
So how did the expedition team then decide on the technology evaluation approach? I mean, ultimately, I know we're talking here about a technology modernization from both a Workday Adaptive and an Incorta perspective, and using those technologies together to modernize your work in your FP&A organization. What was the evaluation criteria? What was most important when you were looking at technologies more broadly?
Yeah, we actually started off, we were looking at an array of different softwares. We ended up evaluating about 15 softwares. A decent amount of those basically had demos, pretty lengthy demos, or we had sandbox environments that we were testing. Um, we really started on the planning side, and we ended up going with Adaptive for that, as they met all of our planning needs, and we felt very comfortable with them. I think what was missing and a really key point is what we learned is that planning analytics have different jobs. I think about this as even in terms of like your team. If you have different analysts, you might have a financial analyst and data analyst. They do have different job functions that they're very good at. And we really learned that they're different and should be separated out, which led us to that decision to kind of separate the layers between planning and Incorta and then analyzing and doing our analytics in Incorta, excuse me, planning and adaptive. So we ended up with kind of this dual prong solution that really complement each other and met all of our planning and also all of our analytical needs.
Yeah, actually, you preempted a question I was going to ask you a little later as to why two technologies, and I appreciate the statement around separating the two from a functional perspective, compared to the nature of the roles that the people in the team were doing. What if I, you know, as we went through, and you just talked a little about this, as we went through the deployment, we did spend a lot of time sort of breaking out what do we want to do here versus what do we want to do in adaptive. And that's not for the folks listening in, that wasn't in based on any level of limitation. It was more aligned to what's the right workflow for the people engaging in the process. So, Troy, can you talk just a little bit about, I mean, we've got dynamic budgeting and instant financial impact visibility and great phrasing on the slide, but I'd love to hear more anecdotally, personally about how the change over here, what it meant from the yes community's perspective, both on the adaptive side, of course, and for Incorta.
Yeah, we started as we kept going through and discovering everything. I really like to focus on adaptive planning and inputs, and then Incorta for the data side. And it really kind of needed to be separated out so that we met both needs. Here it mentions like adaptive. You think about it in terms of our annual budget process and any forecasting. We also have things like monthly projections, ongoing capital planning and new home purchases, and along with some of the version control and auditing and all of that really met Adaptive's core functionality. They're very good at figuring out how to plan for each property and make sure that it's very efficient. We weren't compromising on any of the speed as it runs through all those calculations across versions. And then what complements that nicely is Incorta with the data side. And I think about it almost in terms of really getting into the details of the business, and being able to slice and dice down to the very bottom of your data point. So even if I'm trying to look at one resident or a set of 5 residents, it makes it really easy to look at that and review and analyze what's going on in the company, and isolate those cases so that people in the field are able to go get the data that they need to. It's not just a number, but really digging into the details of what makes that up. And then also, like we've mentioned, I think the mobile app was really key. It's really transformed how the behavior of users right now. Before having to spend, even 5 minutes in the morning loading reports just to see what's going on in your morning, versus now they can just be walking around the property and can pull up any of the same data points that are available on their laptop.
Yeah, and you've mentioned the mobile app. You mentioned it when we first started the project. It was critical to you, and you've mentioned it a few times here. Going back to what you just said, people at the property walking around being able to look at the same numbers in context. For the folks who are joining the webcast, I'd love for them to understand, again, a little more anecdotally. Can you give me an example of what they're looking at and why it's valuable to them as they're walking around those properties?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even, like we have our core KPIs. I think one use case that I really like that was difficult in the past is even like related to our delinquency, for instance. Before they'd have to go load the report, print it off, and then start calls, or even, if you're leaving letters or anything, or even just knocking on their door. It opened up a whole new behavior into letting them just view that list from their phone. They can make calls or do whatever they need to go do their day to day. Also, even with the data loads, it took so long in the morning that, especially like on Eastern time, they'd already be 3 o'clock in their afternoon, and they haven't been able to even load overnight data. It's really now they can just pull up, like we have a community dashboard that pulls up all those core KPIs, so they can see where they're at for the current day compared to last month. And it starts just creating more of a story overall that helps drive the business forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if it was you or one of the other members of the team was talking to me about this again during the deployment. What I really loved about the use case is we talk all the time theoretically about why we need to marry actuals, rich actuals, to a plan and the value of doing that. Here, I love the fact that we could have somebody who was more operationally minded, frankly, using, of course, that operational data, but then comparing it to what the expectations are, the forecast, the outcomes that corporate or even just local management needs to see and is expecting. And now we have the ability to very personally, on a resident by resident basis, interact and try to drive those metrics. So it's really, I love the broader message it sends. Troy, can you talk a little bit about the milestones you went through, or we went through, frankly, during the deployment? Really, what was the most important to you or for the team?
Yeah, for I guess like so for and some of the implementation, as we started launching and everything, we started seeing pretty instant adoption and also just people started getting the data that they needed. So for before, we had 2, 3 minutes loading a report, it was loading in seconds. And there's also additional time that was drilled to drill into those details, but it's just naturally loaded with the dashboard and we have those transaction details. And then also just have again that wait time, waiting until 10 a.m. for all of our data to load, hoping that it doesn't crash, being able to access that data pretty immediately. Really no volume limitations as we continue to grow. And so as we kept evolving, and we've also done a lot in the past year, we're still working through various different iterations of things as we keep trying to start tailoring this more to the field and help support those decisions.
So, I mean, we talked a little around earlier two technologies and the value of two technologies and the delineation of duties, but how they overlap and the sort of the key competency, the sweet spot of adaptive and the sweet spot of what Incorta does dovetail together so well. Um, these metrics are things that we had talked about post deployment, and so okay, we're trying to measure the success of based on not only your goals from the previous slide, but read these are the outcomes. Uh, what is I mean, there's so much in here that we could go into, but of these, what do you think the most? Yes, we've got the annual savings, but I look at this as more the hours and the effort saved is super important to me. I mean, forget the 10,000. Let's look at the 10. Because sometimes a big number can be intimidating. The 10 plus hours for your community manager per month. What value business add? And I'm not saying monetarily, but what can they do instead of?
Yeah,
What's
actually
the
run the property and have time to focus on actually. I mean, they have so many things to do throughout the day. Having to wait for a report was not ideal, and it's just given back some time for them to focus on the core operations, the business, and also kind of dig into some of those problems or opportunities that exist that before they were just waiting and was kind of lost time. Another big thing I think for me is also just the build out time. Before, when we were trying to build out things were really disjointed and took a lot of work to try to get everything into Excel. And then usually it wouldn't actually have the transaction details or the details to make everything up. Even yesterday, I built 2 dashboards, and throughout the day, while I was doing other things as well. And we can vet those and validate basically in hours and not days, while not losing any of the details that are important for running the business and getting into the nitty gritty.
So you mentioned hours, not days. Could that's a comparison, of course, what you were doing previously. But can you get a little more specific? I mean, what was? And I don't mean technically, but just practically speaking, why was it days before, and why is it's hours now or minutes now?
Yeah, so we really started joining all of our data together. I think it was something that was a limitation before, and now we've started setting all those joins that really start telling the story across all of our different metrics, whether it's financials, operations, payroll, or CRM, anything like that. We started tying all that together. So we really have a good back framework that can then be used really to set up those dashboards pretty quickly without having to reinvent the entire wheel and try to get all those different data sources connected in Excel. That can be a little bit trickier and aren't really permanent joins.
Yeah, yeah. And so when coming out of this, and I'll just summarize this quickly. I mean, we talked about on-demand visibility. So you've got your KPIs that the executives see and how they're measuring things. Obviously, the field, the operations managers being able to understand the expectations. I promise I'll come back to the middle box there, but I think that's critical in respect to them having that mobile access and having on-demand contextual understanding of what good looks like, what the expectations are, and being able to align what they're doing to meet those metrics. And of course, the folks in the middle on the FP&A side get pulled both directions, being able to optimize how you work. So days instead of days, now you're down to hours, you're down to minutes on working at that. I'll just I want to define one term. I expect a lot of folks on the call on the webcast and they know what a join is, but if they don't, you mentioned Excel, think of it as highly complex VLOOKUPs. So what instead of having to do historically, you had to do highly complex VLOOKUPs and formulas that cross workbooks and worksheets and try to manage data that was in the tens. In fact, I've seen your data set, billions of records, and now it's just there and available. So you've talked a little about sort of the data science or things that you're looking to do, and maybe if I don't mind me preempting some of the things you're looking for the future, tell me about sort of what's next. I know where you are now, but critically, what do you want to do tomorrow?
Yeah, we're actually working right now on really starting to consolidate even some of our dashboards as we've created those relationships between all of our data, starting to more tell that story and have everything very consolidated in one view so that then they can dig into details very seamlessly into another dashboard if they need to, but we're not overwhelming them with too much data. It drives an action and it's not just another number on a report. And really trying to like get ahead of that so that we can continue to evolve more and more. I don't think it ever will stop. I think we just keep getting better at this as time going on.
Yeah, wonderful. I appreciate and thank you for entertaining some of the questions there. This was just a retrospective looking back at where the journey began and when we started doing the work. And I know at a point in time, and we first engaged with you all, it had been you were going to do a finance modernization with your EPM enterprise performance management environment, specifically in the forecasting and planning, and then said we're going to hold on that until we get our data in order. And so for folks coming into the session today and just trying to understand, okay, we've got technologies here. We have Workday Adaptive and Incorta together, and actually we solved this problem together, even in the proof of concept and the initial sales cycle. So it's been a really nice journey in rolling that out, not only from a corporate perspective, but to keep me honest on the net. You said 300 communities, correct, Troy? Or is it my
Yeah.
over? Yeah, 300 different communities being able to access the information in an aligned fashion. So again, I really love the story and the value is huge. We jumped in a little
Yeah.
about what's next a minute ago, but please, I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think a key point too, just on the timeline, is we basically were able to implement everything basically under 9 months, including Adaptive and Incorta. And then we did a soft launch for a month and fully rolled it out to the company. So we really had a good adoption process on everything. Also, I will just say during that 9 months, we were also in a budget cycle for a few months. We really started in January and we were able to move everything over to both Incorta and Adaptive. I just think it speaks to like how easily this was able to get set up, and it took some work on our side, but the fact that we were able to transition to a full rollout by July really is a key point for me too.
Yeah, and one thing, other thing I'll add then to this is you did 90% of this work internally. I mean,
Yep.
it's a phenomenal team, but I think you had two or three people that were really engaged in building this out. And it was while we provided guidance and we would meet consistently and look and evaluate, but was really more of an educational approach to the deployment. So you all, once you rolled out, you can run it and own it, including expand it.
Yep.
So, yeah, and hats
Yeah,
off
and
to
then
you all
on the
for taking that approach.
yeah, and then on the kind of like what's next, like I just mentioned, kind of revamping our dashboards. I again don't ever think that really ends, and nor should it. It continue to kind of evolve with the business and user needs. Technology evolves quickly. There's always something new and better that we can implement. And also to speak to Incorta, I think they've really taken a lot of our feedback and requests and been able to translate that pretty quick turnarounds into making that happen. But we're excited to keep evolving even the new release that we're on right now, just adding some of that new functionality that really will help users and help kind of consolidate some of our dashboards. And then kind of what's next, additionally, of course, everyone's talking about AI, but we are excited to keep figuring out more opportunities that we can use that. Some of the machine learning integrations, also, some of the chat-based analytics, like if you're a CM, right? If you're a community manager, you want to be able to just ask a question in the morning. So we're excited to continue to look at that and really just keep staying on a competitive edge with across the industry, making sure that we're supporting everyone to the best we can.
So, on the competitive edge, I mean, what are the biggest drivers of being effective in the competition in the REIT space?
Yeah, it's always fast moving, and there's like most companies, there's a lot of requests and things handling. We really just want to. I think the competitive edge that we have as a team, especially as we have both the data and the finance side, and really being able to put that into whatever we want that to look like. So we're excited to keep building on that and expanding and just keeping everyone is visible, all the visibility is possible so that they have everything they need.
Thank you, sir. Um, really, so just to close up, I mean, and then we'll jump over to questions. But uh, Troy, I mean, on your lessons learned side, and you and I talked through this quite a bit. I mean, I appreciated the very practical guidance on technologies and why that was important too, and why you don't want to. Incorta, as an example, is not a planning forecasting tool. It assists in the process. Its job is hardcore analytics, operational analytics, but really business focused and business owned. So it makes a ton of sense to go that direction. Um, just talk a little about the advice that you know you would offer out more broadly.
Yeah, I would just say if you are hesitant at all, I would give it a chance. I know it can be a different thought process to think about how these two solutions can work together, but it's worked really well for us, and we're very happy with the outcome that we've been able to produce in the last year, especially. And I also just think that kind of meets our needs and clearly other users, but for us, it's a focus that the operators and everyone in the field really is our end user, making sure that we're including them in collaborations and making this a better tool as we keep going on. Yeah.
You mentioned when you just said their operators are the end users, and I like that. It goes back to the slide where we had your team, we had the FP&A team, and you had, of course, the executive leadership. You had the FP&A group, and then you had the community managers and the operators in the community. I think one of the things that, and it's something I'm sort of passionate about in respect to these kind of deployments, that we look at uh, modernization activities, and one of the values I feel that organizations that do this the right way, what they get from the combined solution and really getting their data in place is, instead of especially the FP&A team really being the people that do the budget and how or the forecast and put the numbers and explanations in, and it converts that role, or really expands that role, into more of an advisory and a strategy perspective. It doesn't remove the necessity to do the other job, but you're not stuck with just entering numbers in, or I just have to give you a spreadsheet to do the job. It now becomes an advisory relationship, far more strategic in nature. I think that's frankly the growth that a lot of organizations would benefit from. Any thoughts there, or am I overblowing it?
No, I think it's spot on. And really, our goal is to just be that partner. And the natural evolution of any FP&A team, hopefully, is to get past just budgeting and showing a number, but really being a partner for the operators and everyone that needs this data, and being able to slice and dice things and just keep moving the business forward.
All right. Well, Troy, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today, and everybody who joined our session today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I don't have any questions out right this moment, so we'll be taking additional questions as we go along via email. And for those who attended, you will get an email follow up. By all means, please send those out. Happy to talk in some more detail about any section or even topic we covered off on today, and you can get in a technical detail on either side of the house. Phenomenal relationship with the Workday team. So if your questions are more adaptive in nature, please, we'll engage the right folks and get those answered as well. Thank you everybody for attending, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.